Arj Barker has been a fixture on the local comedy scene for decades. The San Francisco-born stand-up and Australian resident, regularly headlining everything from the Melbourne International Comedy Festival to the Adelaide Fringe. You might have seen him on Thank God You're Here, or maybe Spicks and Specks, but he got his start back in the US, honing a sense of humour that's occasionally absurd, sometimes crude, and more recently, a little thoughtful. I'm Konrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, featuring weekly in-depth conversations with fascinating people. Barker's journey began way back in 1989 with open mic nights before a breakthrough performance at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, as well as appearances on American late-night TV for Conan O'Brien, Leno and David Letterman, and a memorable turn on the hit sitcom Flight of the Conchords. He was also the centre of a minor controversy a couple of years ago after asking a breastfeeding mother and baby to leave his show. And we'll get to all of that and more as he joins us in the studio for a chat. Welcome, Arj.
Hey, Conrad.
Thanks for
coming
Great
in.
intro. Appreciate that. Let's talk about your comedy origin story. Go back to Little Arj, back in San Francisco, the suburbs outside of that.
Yeah, just north, yeah.
I've read that your childhood was an idyllic one, filled with freedom and the outdoors, fishing and climbing. When do you reckon you knew you were funny, that funny was something in your bones or your DNA?
I got a reputation just in my immediate family as being funny. I don't know exactly how that came about. My best guess is that at some point I made a joke and got that reaction and realized that felt good. And that was a source of pleasure to make other people laugh. And I think pretty early on, I went back to that well because it was a nice thing. And so I can't say exactly, some process that made me decide to try to be humorous, but I think, you kind of just have humor inside you, or maybe you don't.
Yeah.
But I do. And as far as stand-up, what's interesting is that I often say, well, I started, in the early 90s. I did my first set at the Holy City Zoo in San Francisco. But, a few years ago, I was reflecting and I remembered that my family used to go to these summer camps, which were loosely religious, but kind of, they were as religious as you wanted to be, but it wasn't really pushed on anybody. Definitely, they never pushed me like a Bible. I never had to read the Bible once in my whole life. It wasn't particularly strict. But anyway, they had these talent nights on like one of the last nights of the camp. It was a 1-week camp. And I remember clearly I wrote a monologue and delivered basically a comedic monologue, a satirical sports announcer monologue based on an actual incident that happened at the softball game during the week. Some adults were arguing about, why is it, he didn't help with the kitchen. He didn't help with the dishes, so why is he shouldn't be allowed to play? And as a child, I was watching that and thinking, this is kind of funny. It's kind of ridiculous. The adults are arguing, and they were not acting like adults, in my opinion. So I turned around and made this skit, and I was loosely doing a Howard Cosell impression, which folks might not know, but he was a legendary sports voice in the U.S. And so I was only about 11 or 12 then, best that I could figure out. So I would attribute that to, without realizing that was my first stand-up performance.
You mentioned the Holy City Zoo. That's this sort of famed venue, and in the 1980s, everyone from Robin Williams to Bobcat Goldthwait would have been through there.
Dana Carvey, everybody.
When you had your first set there, I mean, what was that like? I mean, maybe you still get nervous before a show, but I've got to imagine the nerves back then.
It's not a big club, so it was probably would only fit 60 people maximum. I mean, it was really small. And that night there was maybe 20-ish people, and some of them were my sister and her boyfriend at the time, and my buddy Doug. And so I had a little supportive crew in there. About 20% of the audience was my people. But yeah, I was still very nervous, and it was very intense feeling of adrenaline going up there. But I remember getting actual laughs, and not just from my party. I would have been aware. I would have been cognizant. Is that the word? If it was just my family and friends laughing, but I definitely got some actual laughs, and I was immediately and utterly hooked. But I saw a lot of guys go through there. Mark Maron, Patton Oswalt, they all came through there.
I apologize if my research isn't right here, but I had read that you dropped out of college.
Well, it wasn't a dramatic thing. After high school, a lot of people will apply to and go to a 4-year college in the U.S., and there's 1,000 colleges, ranging from ones that are hard to get into to ones that will take almost anyone.
Of course.
But even a step below that.
Community college?
Community college.
Yeah, sorry. My wife's an American, so I'm well familiar with the 2-year community college.
Anybody can go to community college.
It's a little bit like a TAFE for our listeners.
Okay,
sort of.
That's good. I want something that people can relate it to. You just sign up and go. And it's in a way it's nothing wrong with it. They're some decent classes and decent teachers, and I was doing that for a while. But at the same time, I had started stand-up and was so driven to do that. And that's all I wanted to do was stand-up. So
I was just curious, I guess, because, I'd read that your father migrated from India to the US to study, ultimately became like an engineer. And often that sort of first-generation migrant family, like education for their children is like everything to
That's
them
true.
And is a rule. So I have my suspicions, but I don't know, like, how did your dad feel about you going into comedy rather than, pursuing that kind of academic path?
Well, my dad, and I'd say this much to his credit, was never heavy-handed about that kind of thing. Even when he knew I wanted to do stand-up, he said, "Yeah, but you should just get a degree or get a college degree." And he would say that, but it was never like intense or forced or anything. And I mean, at that point, I was over 18 anyway. I could kind of do what I wanted, but in your intro, you made it sound like it was all just like a Norman Rockwell childhood, but I actually was very, I acted out a lot. I had a lot of, can't say exactly where it came from, but I seemed to have a lot of anger at times, especially as a teenager. And I was, I started drinking and smoking pot when I was 12, 13.
Oh, wow.
Not like constantly, not like.
Yeah, but still.
But yeah, dabbling and, when we were able to acquire these certain things, we would do that. So, and that continued all through my teens, and well, to be fair, it continued well into my 20s. And but so my point is, what's my point? My parents gave me a lot of freedom, and I've often abused the freedom. That whole thing about the 80s kid, where they say, we would just leave the house and your parents didn't know where you were. That was absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
I had my bike. I'd take off on my bike, and they would say, be back for dinner. But a lot of times I wouldn't, I might stay out longer. But they kind of just threw their hands up after a while. I'm like, oh, I hope he survives. And there was probably some dynamics at home that were affecting everybody and stuff. It wasn't like violent, horrible fighting, but maybe there was a lack of communication in our house. And who knows, I mean, I don't worry about it too much because I have a good relationship with all my family now.
So your breakthrough was meant to have arrived in sort of 1997 when you win the prestigious kind of Best Newcomer Award at Edinburgh Fringe. You start getting TV slots, the ones I mentioned before, like Late Night, The Tonight Show, The Late Show. Was that a bit of a whirlwind?
Well, that was a good year. I can't remember the exact order, but I was starting to book a spot here and there. I think first person to put me on air was, I'd done some Comedy Central stuff, so I was building my way up. Comedy Central's cable TV back home, and they were pretty new, but I was on some of their early package shows where 3 or 4 comedians in half an hour and that type of thing, and did those. Then booked, I think, Conan, but around that, definitely in 97 was when I got the pass on Letterman, which is a big deal. Because back then that was the kind of arguably the most coveted stand-up comedy spot to get on television, aside from like an HBO special, which would be even a bigger deal. It was awesome. It went really well. But I often tell this story, but I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's worth telling. So I did this show, and I thought this is a bit, feels like a big deal. Actually, took a couple trips because they bumped me once or twice. So I'd fly out there and fly back. Finally did it. It went really well. And I thought, oh man, is this going to change my life? And the next morning I was crossing the street in New York, and a gentleman that was, as I recall, was a city worker, doing something, maybe lining the trash can there in the street or something. But I recall he was a city worker, and he said, yeah, he flagged me and said, hey man, wasn't you on Letterman last night? And I said, yeah, I was. He said, oh man, I was good, whatever. I said, thanks. And in my mind, I thought, oh boy, here we go. My life is definitely not going to ever be the same. To this day, that's the only stranger, not counting comedians, because they'll say, oh, I watched your set and this and that. But that's the only sort of public recognition that I got, like walking around on the street.
Seriously?
From that set ever. However, which is funny, and it's kind of a funny burn, and it's funny how fate works. Having said that, that credit really helped me with bookings in the clubs. It gives you a lot of credibility at the time. It was really a feather in the cap professionally. But actually, I've been thinking about this stuff because I was trying to, you try to anticipate what are you going to talk about. And I just wanted to say that in terms of, I'm happy to talk about quote unquote accomplishments, but the big lesson I've learned is that, and this is so cliche, of course, people say it's the journey, it's not the destination, but I think I understand that now, finally in my life. And I call it the process. Ultimately, when you get the actual thing that you want, you're happy for a few minutes, but then you start thinking about, but it'd even be better to have that,
Yeah.
And, or now that I got this, how can I get that? But now I'm at a point where I really just enjoy, I really enjoy the process of stand-up. And wherever, I'm not so worried about where it goes at this point, although I have the benefit of, having had a decent career and not, I'm not struggling to make ends meet, so I should acknowledge that. But I just really love doing stand-up. And I'm less ambitious as to where it goes. But back to the accomplishments. What you want to ask?
That's all right. I think you've answered all of it.
I think, if anyone's interested in what I've done, then they probably want to hear about the high points or whatever, or the low points too, which
let's
we'll get
talk
to.
about the flight of the Conchords.
Absolutely.
Mean, that was a really memorable turn.
That was incredible.
You were Dave.
Dave,
just doling out really bad advice to Brett and Jermaine. That's Mackenzie and Clement on Flight of the Conchords. Did that give you a career a jolt? I mean, or just
Absolutely.
Was it fun? Like, what do you want to tell people about the Conchords?
That was a beautiful thing that fell into my lap. I was friends with the boys from actually meeting them originally here at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, then becoming better friends over in New Zealand at the festival there. And they were just very welcoming and like, hey, come meet some of our friends, and made me feel like family. So we were friends. And then one day, and I'd see him here or there, and because I was traveling a lot at that time to go everywhere, trying to cover all these markets at once, which is exhausting. I don't do that anymore. But I was, see him in London or whatever, New York. And then I would not see him for months at a time. But one time I just heard from Jermaine, and he said, oh, we're doing a show for NBC, and we have a part for you in mind. But I 99% was offered the gig, but then they said, let's go, just come to LA and meet the director, James Bobin. And I thought, okay, it seemed too good to be true. Finally a chance to screw it up, because I've never been super confident about my acting, or never thought of myself as like an actor, more of a comedian who would act if he could. But I went to that audition, and we had a good time, and James was laughing. He's, really great guy. He's got a great laugh as well. And I got the part. And another interesting, again, I don't know if it's that interesting, but I used to wear bandanas around my head. That was my actual sort of style that I would do.
Oh, that was your thing, and I just assumed that was a Conchords.
No, I would do that I think probably just because I thought it looked cool, or why does anyone do anything?
Yeah.
But then when I went to the audition, I had that on there, and James kind of laughed at it and said, "Yeah, I like the bandana." And so that became the character. I think he has a bandana. I think he wears a bandana in every single scene.
Yeah, he does.
And that kind of ruined it for me. I stopped wearing it for the most part. Occasionally, I'll still put it on because I get a little stubborn. I think, well, this is actually my actual thing.
Yeah.
But then I mostly don't do it, and especially didn't do it around the time of the show because it would look like I was like, why is that guy dressed in his costume, How badly does he want to be recognized, So I had to kind of lay off it. I think one theory is that it was just a straightening agent. When you have kind of your hair gets longer, gets curly,
sure,
you can kind of force it to be a little straighter. And if you do it right, and then you take the bandana off, also you get a kind of a cool 70s coif.
So what's your connection to Australia? Like you've been a local, like on the scene for decades. Yeah. I think I saw you doing stand-up 20 years ago here. Like, how did you get down here? Like,
well, I was on that trajectory of I loved working overseas. I was on my second year of Edinburgh. Yeah, and Mary Tobin, who's a Melbourne promoter, still here. Hi, Mary. She came out and saw a show in Edinburgh. And so I didn't really like the performance. And if it was me watching me, I wouldn't be here right now. But she said, "Oh, I thought it was great. I want to get you out to Australia." So that was that. I came out about 2000 or 99, and right away I loved it. I loved the way people did business here. The casual, friendly, it was like the opposite of what the vibes that I felt in Hollywood, where I felt intimidated and I felt like everyone's kind of like, putting off some kind of image and, there's so much hierarchy that you pick up on in LA as a stand-up when you're, dealing with management and different agents. But it wasn't like that here. It was just like, hey, we like to have a good time. And here's a glass of champagne at like 11 in the morning. I was like, what? These guys are crazy, because that doesn't happen back home. And I never looked back. And I started getting gigs on TV pretty quick. I got Hey Hey, and back then, I really think that they thought I was maybe slightly more successful than I was, just because it wasn't as many overseas international comics coming out back then.
Yeah.
There was a handful, like Rich Hall, Amazing Jonathan. I know that I'm aware there were some for sure. It wasn't like now where like the amount of comics that have come through the festival and people are on tour. You get all these bigger names that come through. This is part of their tour stop, and medium names that come through and do the circuits with the lounge, and they do the sit down, and they do the Comedy Store, and mediums and medium heavies and heavies doing the Palais and who knows what. But my point is, comedy's international now. It wasn't really at the time.
Yeah.
It was so different from my experience when I first went to Britain, which turned out to be awesome. And I had an awesome few years of really going hard in Britain, and things, as you know, worked out pretty well. But when I first got there, I was like, oh God, I made a huge mistake. Kind of tanked at my first set. London felt like a cold city. And, I persisted and I broke through, and then made friends and and was working in like 40 different clubs around London. But whereas with Australia, I just felt like this is just like flowing. This just feels good.
And your style of humor seems to really fit here. I've seen it and experienced it, but it's been described as a mix of sarcasm, absurdity, and comical ignorance. I'm just wondering, has that shifted at all over the years? Like your recent things, I was listening to your album, which is coming out this month, The Minefield, and there's material in there on consciousness. It seems like kind of thoughtful, wistful. Is that like a response to the times? Is it you showing your age? Is it like personal events? Like you lost a friend recently, and you're asking kind of big questions in your act now.
Well, the sense, actually, I've been interested in let's call it the bigger picture of the big questions, like what's the point of life? Why do I exist? What happens when I die? All this stuff has really been of interest to myself because in my 30s, and so it was somebody in Australia left me a copy of The Power of Now, and I don't even know who it was.
Wow.
Because they just said, I think you'll like this book. What that book did was kind of open my eyes to the idea that there's a lot more to existence than just it sounds really obvious, but there's a lot more to life than just having a good time. There's deeper levels of mystery and beauty. We may have to cut this part out because the words aren't forming as readily as I'd like. Basically, it just opened my eyes to the idea that there's a lot more.
Yeah.
Than just having a great time and getting paid and trying to get laid. And I mean, that's probably as good as I can put it. It doesn't answer all the questions, but Power of Now, for those that don't know Eckhart Tolle, it's like a pretty famous book, but it's basically just a really clearly explained manual for mindfulness and like how powerful it is when practiced. But then, hilariously, consciousness is like the one thing that science struggles the most with. The smartest people struggle to try to get their head around it and understand it. And if anyone listening wants to Google what's the biggest mysteries left in science, consciousness will almost surely show up as in the top 3, if not the number 1 question. How what is the nature of consciousness? They call it the hard problem of consciousness. You probably heard about that. But,
yeah.
It's a massive mystery. It's like the number 1 mystery. And the other one is like, what is the universe? They're dark matter and dark energy. And I don't know if I mentioned that in that iteration of the show, but
You do, yeah.
But we
how dark matter is like, it's like 98% of the known universe.
Yeah.
It's like science, get on it.
Yeah. So no big deal. It's only 99% of everything that we don't. Yeah, that's true. So I have massive respect for science and the achievements and all the comforts that we enjoy and the safeties we enjoy, but medicine, incredible. But, they still really don't know what 99 or 97% of the universe is. They don't know what it is. Okay, that's kind of an issue. And also consciousness is even bigger because without consciousness, we don't even know there's a universe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to me, that's like so amazing. And it's kind of funny, but it's interesting. And that's why I thought it was definitely worth making that the central theme of the album, although I do cover a lot, do go into some various other things. And it's always about getting laughs. I've always strived to make a punchline occur, make something into a comedy bit, because I know that I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a scientist, I'm a comedian, and I'm thankful. I don't think I'm above making a joke at all. I love it. But I sometimes want to talk about what I want to talk about. So the only solution is to make it funny.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the process of trying to come up with gags and develop them and make them as good as they can be. And I can't say, I think my next show might be less deep, It might just be more funny jokes. Although I'm working on a bit about, I can't help it. The events in the world influence me a little bit. So
yeah. Well, let's talk about an event within one of your shows.
Absolutely.
Which we referenced earlier. This was a couple of years ago, 2024 show at the Athenaeum.
Oh, Jesus, here we go.
You asked a woman and a baby to leave your show. It created this huge controversy.
This is gotcha.
You're on TV.
This is gotcha journalism, folks. This is what they do. They butter you up with 45 minutes talking about, tell me about your family.
Bunch of softball stuff.
And it's just all about just getting to this so they can make you look bad.
Stuff right between your eyes.
And I'm only messing. Go ahead.
That was rehashed and re-examined from every angle. You had to answer for it on all sorts of talk shows. Then the mother was on all sorts of talk shows as well. There would have been countless think pieces. It must be weird to be at the center of a storm like that, like show after show, column after column. Like,
I'll tell you, it was eye-opening. because I never had been anything remotely involved in anything like that. And also, to give you an idea of the extent, even my relatives in India, and they don't live in a major city, they live in a smaller city, regional city in India. They were familiar with the story. It was on like the online news there. But the main headline was that the comic kicks out the breastfeeding mom. And unfortunately for reality, I couldn't see her well enough to know if that never crossed my mind.
You've explained that.
Yeah,
the stage lights are on you, so the audience is largely just darkness.
Yeah, I mean, I can see silhouette, and lean forward, I can see that she has a child. And so what I would say is that, for sure, if these aren't things you get a chance to rehearse or practice. Things happen on stage, and you just try to deal with it as best you can. And now, given what I've learned from that experience, I probably could have handled it more smoothly, or but I didn't have that practice chance. And at the time, I did try to be kind about it, but just like, I'm really sorry, but it all just kind of got a little out of hand, really quickly. And I had people on the night, I had even people kind of scolding me like, how dare you? And other people were cheering and people were yelling, and it was chaos. And, I think it made me wiser going forward in terms of, dealing with something like that. Well, I haven't had a situation like that since. But it also, I have to say, taught me a lot about the media and how the media narrative isn't necessarily the one that is most accurate, but is the one that gets the most interest, gets the most eyes, gets the most clicks. At the time, I have to say, I didn't really get the feeling that people were that worried about a fair representation of what happened or finding out. Is more like what will get people the most riled up, and it worked, and it snowballed into this thing, and I got a lot of, really angry, some really nasty emails, which to be honest was upsetting, because as a comedian, occasionally I get an angry email like, you're terrible, you're the worst comedian ever. But I'm not used to having, 50, in one morning saying that, I'm a horrible person and I should go home and all that. But there were lots of friendly ones too, supportive, and even after that, ticket sales went up for a few months, like above normal. So it was about maybe 10-50%. And I called that the baby bump after also coining the term babygate, which was, as far as I know, I was the first person to use that. And so that was fun, because I like naming things, that's part of the creative process. But yeah, I learned a lot from that, and ultimately don't think that I came out worse for it, but it wasn't super fun at the time.
What do you do outside of telling jokes? I've heard that photography is a hobby. I've heard that you love to work out. I've heard that you are into woodworking.
Yeah, I mean, these are all true. I just go through phases where I'm more keen on one or the other.
Okay.
So I mostly bring my camera if I'm going to a beautiful nature spot. So I do some of these regional towns around the country, and I'll often bring a birding lens. So it's a 800 mil, and that's fun. So then I'll go look for animals and critters and birds and stuff, or whatever I can see. That's fun. And but then I also, and exercise to me is like not so much of a hobby as like, it's really, it's pretty locked in as a habit that I call it the magic pill, because it just, it improves, keeps my mood much better, much happier.
So all of that stuff sounds incredibly mindful, incredibly therapeutic. And there's this line I found of yours. You said, like, why pay a counselor when you can share your thoughts with 500 people at once? That's you talking about stand-up. So I just wanted to end on that. Like, is stand-up, is comedy like a genuinely kind of cathartic, therapeutic experience for you? So what do you get out of it?
One thing I get out of it is I spend a lot of time on my own during the day, like a lot of time, except for my dogs. Thank God for my dogs. I don't really feel alone actually when I'm hanging with them, and I'm okay. I really enjoy the daytime. I feel like the daytime's the time to be doing stuff. But at night, being that I'm, and my divorce was years ago, and I've had one relationship since then. But the nights can be pretty quiet. But stand-up, but they're not, thankfully, because the stand-up gets me out of the house. And I always see other comics I know. I'm pretty friendly with a lot of in any city I go to, actually, I'm liable to see guys I know out there. If I drop into a comedy club, I know the staff. But then the audience also, they're my friend, and I go up on stage, and I just enjoy that social interaction. And it's a strange social interaction because they're listening and I'm talking, but nonetheless, it is a dialogue with humans, and I love that part of it. And I also I'm on this ongoing break from alcohol. That's really my buzz these days. That's probably my main buzz is getting on stage, and it's not the intense adrenaline rush of as it once was starting out. But it's still like, it's baseline adrenaline, like, okay, you got to get this done. Everyone's looking at you. You're out there, and, it's immediate. Like, you kind of know, like, either you succeeded or failed on joke per joke. Like, did that go or did that not go? Sometimes it goes medium. But and it's a rush. And so I'm addicted to that. And to me, that's a healthy addiction, at least for the time being, to just go out and get in front of audiences and honing material. And I'm working out for my next, you asked me if it was therapeutic. I would say so, given what I've just said, that it's a chance for me to connect with people. And that's therapy. Just connecting with other humans is therapeutic. And I love it. And I'm definitely sure I'm doing the right job. That I was whatever. I mean, I don't say I was meant to do it, but I'm very happy with my career choice.
Awesome. It's been great connecting with you,
Arj.
Yeah,
you too. Thanks. So I know I ramble a lot, but it's not every day that, someone's like, yeah, please talk about yourself.
To enjoy more in-depth journalism from the latest edition of Good Weekend, visit us at theage.com.au or smh.com.au. This episode was produced by Konrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery with technical assistance from Cormac Lally. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills. Tom McKendrick and Lisa Muxworthy oversee our podcasts, and Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend. If you enjoyed this episode, follow our podcast and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, and thanks for listening.